Hi, and welcome. My name is Milan, and I'm a marketing manager here at Vizru. And today I'm joined by our founder and CEO, Ramesh Mahalingam. And we just wanted to go over a couple of misconceptions regarding zero code in the zero code industry. So, Ramesh, if you would uh, humor me, for you, when it comes to zero code, which is relatively new compared to low code, which has been around for a while, what would you say some of the primary differences or some of the differences between the two environments?
Sure. So zero code, as I see it, is the inevitable as well as the most logical step in the evolutionary train of software development. And we have seen a huge shift in how applications are being developed, and so we are at the penultimate step as we see it. And if you take the low code environments, for example, say take vendors like Pega or OutSystems or Appian, you know, these companies were founded about 20, 25 years ago. And that's exactly when Microsoft came up with Visual Basic as an example. So Visual Basic is one type of low code. And so the low code principle does not eliminate coding out of the equation. Some use C sharp, some use enterprise Java beans, and so on. So they don't really eliminate coding out of the equation. They sort of conceal it behind the user interface. However, the the headache of having to manage them, the total cost of ownership, only IT can build, all those challenges continue to exist within the low code environment. But if you take the zero code environment, it actually addresses all those problems completely. It eliminates IT bottleneck. It enables and empowers the business teams to actually lead, build, and deploy applications by themselves. And it is a complete shift in the paradigm of how an applications are being developed and how they will be developed in the future.
I see. So, with that being said, with it being like the next evolutionary trait and how low code has been long established, do you view them as competitors or as competition?
No, actually, the low code, we consider them as our predecessors. Again, if you take the evolutionary tree, they are the previous stage to where the zero code is today. And so, a classic example, right? If you take Tesla, now Tesla is a fully autonomous, self-driving car. But if you really look at the evolutionary tree of an automotive industry, starting from Model T to how it evolved to these large cars, to how the manual transmission was evolved, and then the automatic transmission. And in the 2000s, we had GPS, systems and cameras, and then driver's assist. So as you can see, these were slowly taking the autonomy component. They were pushing the boundaries, and they were pushing the boundary just a bit. And then just Tesla just took them completely to a different direction, where it's fully autonomous, fully electric. It things acts on its own. And so Vizru's zero code is very similar. We've seen the evolution, and then we realized that there are certain tipping points that has happened in the industry that has really made the zero code possible. And now Vizru has made this entire full stack application that can be deployed without coding, and it can be deployed at scale.
Kind of speaking of Tesla, bouncing off of that, and the kind of innovations they've done within the automotive industry, where they've almost changed the way that you purchase a vehicle or that you would trade in your vehicle over time. How would you say Vizru or Zero Code is kind of making these innovations or the changes within the software, the development industry?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. See, if let's take the Tesla analogy. Tesla changed the consumer behavior completely. So what do I mean by that? Well, people used to go to a dealership to configure the car. So only the dealers would be able to tell them what kind of cars are available in the inventory. And now they don't have to do that anymore. They go online, they can configure the car that they are interested in, and then servicing, right? They don't have to go to the service centers anymore. They press one button and dashboards upgrades to new service, and so it becomes more self-serviceable. And this is exactly what we have done to the software industry as well. And what do we mean by that? Like, let's say a line of business wants to innovate, right? They want to change something. Traditionally, in the traditional model or even the low code model, they would have to go to IT, and IT would assess the project, and then they will put it in the queue and so on and so forth. So there was such huge bottleneck that it was creating, because there's only 5% of your organization is less than 5% is IT, 90% is line of business. So natural bottleneck gets formed. So we completely eliminated it. So we have re-engineered the entire architecture, not just how the platform functions, but we have also started to really empower the rest of the organization to actively participate in innovation. So we have removed all the middle complexities that were causing all the bottlenecks. So now the line of business can take control, they can build and deploy, and they can try, fail, and try again. And all of that, instead of taking 18 months today in the low code or the traditional model, it takes only about 4 to 5 weeks to make it successful.
I see. So with some of these changes, as you mentioned, with eliminating IT bottlenecks or putting everything within the business teams to empower the organization, are those some of the only benefits to some of these changes with how zero code operates, or what would you say some of the main benefits or value of working with zero code would be?
So again, actually a really good question. So rather than giving a list of benefits, let me talk about the core benefit, right? The traditional model, when you hand it over to an IT organization or an internal product development team, it has always been an inside out approach. That is, they will look at a problem, from fixing it internally. So it's an internal IT system, internal automation, internal process that's broken. They're trying to fix it. So it's always an inside out approach. But when zero code hands off this capability to line of business, it completely changes it. It becomes an outside in approach. So what do we mean by outside in? The line of business, the customer support team, for instance, customer experience team, so they understand the gap that they have in the industry because they are very close to the customer. They understand the gap, and they are well aware of the assets that are stuck within their own organization. So the outside in approach allows them to not just unlock the enterprise asset, the intrinsic asset. One example, one of the largest European company, they have 60 years worth of data. So that data that they have is the intrinsic asset that they hold. So now the line of business is trying to convert that data sets into data analytics as a service that they can deliver to their customers. So the outside in approach that Vizru Zero Code allows them to do, it allows them to unlock the intrinsic value as well as monetize it and commercialize the data set that they have as a service. So it's a completely different perspective between how the traditional and the low code industry was looking at an IT issue. It was always looking at it as an IT problem. But now enterprises are looking at it as monetization problem. How do I really unlock the value that I have within my organization? And how do I commercialize it? How do I monetize it? How do I sell this? And how do I improve my top line growth? And so this fundamental shift is what Vizru has been extremely successful. So this is where we've done really well.
So I like that outside in approach that you mentioned. And then kind of piggybacking off of that, you also mentioned um, customers unlocking the value of their assets and being able to monetize that as being the next step with what Zero Code and Vizru wants to do for the industry. But with that being said, how do you handle that intellectual property? Because that would belong to the client that would be providing that to you. So how do you work around that, or how do you work with that with the client?
No, actually, we complement that strategy. Vizru is the only company that actually allows enterprises to own their own IP. So exclusive ownership of the capabilities that they've built. We have a way to decouple from the platform, and they can hold it. So when you look at the intellectual property, you have to look at it in two ways. One, the data sets that they own. So naturally, we have the deployment strategy within the platform that allows them to choose the hosting environment of their choice. They can host it in their environment. So naturally, the entire data IP remains with them because it's theirs. In addition, the models that's built, analytics, the capabilities, as well as the automation that they build, configure within the platform, we can actually decouple that entire business logic, and that entire business logic is deployed on AWS or any other cloud provider of their choice. So that means the application overlay, as well as the underlying data set, everything else belongs to them. So we have right within the platform inbuilt capability to decouple the intellectual property of the customer. So what this means is the enterprises, while in the traditional model, they build all these things for automating internally and so on. However, we, in addition to that, we can allow them to build and deploy it as a SaaS service and own the intellectual property on their own.
So coming back to your Tesla analogy, because I like that quite a bit, because in my mind, I view it as you have your traditional gas automobiles, which would be traditional development environment, and you have your hybrids that came up afterwards, which you could view as low code, where it's a hybrid of not needing the code, but you still have a little bit of coding to do in the back end, compared to zero code now, which would be Tesla, which is fully electronic. And speaking of that, Tesla, whenever they were coming up, because they were the first, they ran into a lot of challenges that they needed to overcome because it's uncharted territory. So with Vizru almost being in the same position of being in this uncharted territory and creating a zero code environment, what challenges did you run into that you had to overcome that may have not come up with a hybrid model or a low code or a traditional model?
Yeah, actually, our engineering team, faced quite a lot of problems and quite a lot of issues, primarily because, even though we pioneered the zero code environment, we all came from coded environment as well. So what we didn't know, because we are the first ones to break those territories. So the biggest example was, when in a traditional world, once you have completed development, you move to a development instance, to the QA instance, and a stage instance, and then the production instance. Some folks will have 4-tier deployment architecture. Some organization will have 5-tier deployment architecture. Most of our clients are large enterprises, regulatory enterprises, so they have 5-tier architecture. So after we built the first major core system platform for one of the large insurance companies, we forgot to take into account how we are going to move that entire application to test instance. So it's almost like you built this massive cake, but you forgot that it is so big that you don't know how to really move the cake to the wedding. So we were stunned. That moment when we all stared at each other and tried to figure out if it was code, we would have copied and pasted the code. But these are blocks like Legos. How are you going to carry this massive tower that you built without breaking it and then gently placing it to the next deployment environment? So what was the biggest challenge that we faced actually turned out to be one of our biggest IP that we built within our company. We built the IP that made the interlocking component, like the Lego blocks interlocking component, that made this entire deployment strategy possible. And in a way, that one fundamental IP that we have built has made the zero code possible. And to this day, the low code vendors still actually haven't cracked that code. So they don't know how to deploy it in this kind of an intelligent manner. And so that fundamental innovation is the one that has propelled us into a world where now point, click, an entire stack can be brought up, it can be brought down, the entire stack can be upgraded. Just through a dashboard, we could remotely just publish the entire application to the client's environment. So you don't need anybody on site to do it. So that one fundamental change, changed how we do business and how consumers' behavior changed as well. So there are many more of this. However, just like how in Tesla, when he built it, everybody questioned, how are you going to build charging stations? It's going to run 129 miles. What happens 130th mile? That's not going to be a charging station. And so Tesla did solve that problem. And very similar thing for us, this fundamental interlocking mechanism between the assets that are built within the application, that is the most profound invention that has really made the zero code possible.
Wonderful. Well, I want to give a big thank you to Ramesh for joining us here today and clearing up some of these misconceptions. As zero code is still new, there's a lot of unknowns within the industry and the environment. So I'm glad that we were able to get some answers to these questions. So thank you again, Ramesh.
Thank you very much. And I look forward to your the second Fireside chat session. And I look forward to giving more of these because, as you mentioned, it is new, but it is inevitable. And a couple of years ago, customers were a little hesitant. Now, customers across banks, insurance, manufacturing, healthcare, everybody's actually jumping onto the zero code bandwagon. So it's even more important for us to help our customers understand the value proposition the zero code actually has to offer. So thanks again.